So what constitutes monster toughness? What are we talking about, really? Especially in terms of the character's improvement and in what variables. Well, it's reasonably clear in many ways. The DM guide calls it out explicitly. We're dealing with hit points on both sides, foes and characters. And we're dealing with armor class on both sides. And we're dealing with damage done on both sides. Now, that relationship, and chance to hit. The relationship of those we can think of as kind of a stable escalation. And in many cases, it is an uninteresting escalation because it maintains whatever parity is established as the baseline, which favors the monsters a little bit in terms of chance to hit, favors the characters a little bit in terms of other things. But we establish that is what we're going to call parity of third level characters confronting, 3 hit dice foes. Then we are going to wiggle those by a number of special qualities. Special qualities for the characters involve, first of all, some advantages they'll have by their magical weapons and things like that. But also, more importantly, the flexibility that will increase dramatically as the magic casting characters go up in level. The party not only simply bulks, but it also broadens in its capabilities. And that changes a lot. So the monsters, on the other hand, have an interesting array, and right from the start, an interesting array of really savage instant effects. And they're mostly saved against, but saves are very, very dicey things and are typically not very forgiving. You've got 14 or higher, 16 or higher, and stuff like that in a lot of cases. So the chance for being paralyzed, which is in many cases a death sentence, or otherwise, just killed, poison, or any number of other things, is pretty severe. So you will see that the monsters have, from the beginning, kind of this little toolbox of insta-wins that are really nasty. So what do we see that makes this fun? A couple of interesting things have cropped up to me for this particular game, this particular version of Dungeons and Dragons, which is to say its own game, and it's not even a version, it's its own thing, which is that the monster hit dice are kind of low. I mean, especially in, the first monster manual, as I have found, a number of some fairly nasty foes in terms of effect don't really have a lot of hit points. So therefore, 1 or 2 good hits, and of course damage rolls will crop up as 1s and 2s once in a while, but a couple of solid hits will do the job on most of the creatures that they've encountered. And you might be, impressed. Oh, this is a 4 hit dice monster. Well, you roll 4d8 and it comes up with a total of 7. That happens. So some of the creatures they've fought have been effectively 1-hit creatures. And some of them, which numerically on the page would have looked considerably more substantial, turned out to be 2-hit creatures. And then there are a couple who turned out to be, remarkably tough for their size. So hit dice, just like for characters, wiggle quite a lot. And looking at the creatures, and never mind the huge named creatures, are the things that are so emblematic of nastiness that they, get up there into the double-digit hit dice. Most of them are even, 7th level creature has 7 hit dice, which seems like a hell of a lot, and it is relative to first level characters, but it can roll low. And keep that in mind. The hit dice for the monsters in practice, keep them in, especially in terms of parity against, characters of that level, keeps the monsters a little bit more, once hit, a little more vulnerable than one might think just by looking at them on the page. Armor class, too, is, of course, a big issue, because even to hit what we think of as an easy armor class is often a 50% chance, which, if you think about it, isn't that great. So it's a good idea. I mean, you can see why people have tons of henchmen and stuff like that as quickly as they can. But the idea, too, brings in the tactics of the 1 minute melee round and what we actually do to deploy to make as much use of, for example, those initiative canceling tactics and a wide variety of other things, where you place yourselves and who knows what. But the point here is that the monsters can be, if you just stand up to the monsters, then the saving throws are going to take you down. You're going to end up dead, paralyzed, petrified, terrified, and all the things, poisoned especially. All the things that can happen to you will happen to someone, and possibly all of you, quite quickly. So it's a really good idea to keep the freaking things from touching you, or all the other things, that the ways that they zap you. And with that in mind, you've got a chance. So that's sort of my thought on monster toughness, except for a couple of points. One is that the Fiend Folio is pretty nasty. That the whole equation sort of shifts over a column. In terms of the monster manual, the Fiend Folio creatures are, easily a level above what their listed hit dice would suggest. And then another point about this is experience. So the experience point rewards for monsters are shockingly low. You really don't get much. If you try to slaughter your way into leveling up, the hordes, the massacres you must perpetrate are beyond belief, and there's no way statistically that you're going to make it. You will end up terrified, petrified, paralyzed, dead, and all the other bad things that can have poisoned. All the other bad things that can happen to you will happen before that happens. So even though I could crank a little bit about how I think the Fiend Folio rewards are a little low in comparison to the Monster Manual, overall, monsters are just not the way that you're going to get those thousands and thousands of experience points you'll need if leveling up is part of the picture. So those are my thoughts on monster toughness. It is only part one of who knows how many parts. Regarding the interplay of experience points, activity, placement of things, consequence for play, and so forth, that I'll be addressing, in who knows how many little assemblies of thought.